Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is the third part in a series of webinars that are opening and continuing and driving the discussion on the future of the workplace. Today's is called The Power of Place, Designing Spaces that Support the Workforce. And we're so pleased to be with you. I'm Brian Calley, the president of the Small Business Association of Michigan. And as we're wrapping up this third part in this series, I want to thank Consumers Credit Union for the strong partnership that we and our members enjoy with the great work that they do in support of communities, individuals, and small businesses across the landscape of Michigan. And so the moderator for today's panel will be Lynn Jarman Johnson, the Chief Marketing Officer for Consumers Credit Union. Lynn, over to you.
Thank you, Brian. What a fast moving 3 weeks it's been. We've had a wonderful presentation about the future of our office environments, of our workspaces, and some of those are in our home right now, aren't they? Thank you so much. I'd love to introduce you to our panel. Let's talk a little bit about what exactly we focused on and let you know that both SBAM and Progressive A&E plus Consumers Credit Union will be having all of these webinars available for you to watch. And so make sure that you take a moment to reflect back on not only the people that we are helping design spaces for, which we're going to talk about today, but also your strategy that focuses on making sure those spaces really support your workforce. And everybody's workforce is different. Today we have such a great panel for you. I'd like to introduce you to Kristen Davidson. Kristen is a very dear friend of mine, but she's such a professional across the country. And she focuses on organizational development for Consumers Credit Union. And she is currently, as we speak, I bet she probably has a pen in hand. She's actually helping design our workplace spaces in a totally different way as we are opening up our offices at Consumers Credit Union. Brian Calley is the president of the Small Business Association of Michigan, obviously extremely dedicated to making sure that our businesses are supported and successful. And in just a few moments, we're going to be able to talk a little bit about what the governor has come out with on new workforce concepts and rules and regulations. Brian's going to be announcing those at the end of our webinar. And Melissa Malberg, wonderful to have gotten to know Melissa. She's with Progressive A&E and is a workplace strategy and discovery consultant. And really what that means, she focuses on space. So where are you right now? Where are you sitting right now? Where are you contemplating your employees might be sitting? Just in a week, we blink, and all of a sudden, what happens? The CDC comes out and says, hey, you know what? We trust the fact that we are vaccinated and that you do not have to wear masks and that we're ready to start rolling back to work. So we have a poll for you to take as we kick off so we can see where everybody's sitting right now. And that is, with everything that happens so fast, with the guidelines from the CDC, has your company started to implement changes, or are you waiting for that dust to settle? Do you have a plan that you're already rolling out, or are you just pausing and waiting? Let's take a moment to take that poll and we'll get rocking and rolling with our panel. I think one of the really neat things that I've been in, oh wow, look at this. This is really great. You're going to love this webinar today, since many of you, 25%, are rolling out changes as you go. But oh my goodness, 75% are waiting. And again, at the end today, we're going to be talking about some of those changes that are heading your way. So thank you so much for taking that poll. So yesterday I was on a conference call with our executive team, along with our employee teams. And the word space is used consistently. One of the words that was used, and I'm going to throw this right to Melissa, was a word that I had not heard before, but it is in many architectural, engineering components, words that I think you're going to hear too, and that is the word hoteling. But there's so much more. Melissa, how do we define space right now? And as a newbie, I didn't even know what hoteling meant in a conference call yesterday.
Hi, Lynn. Thanks for the question. I think that's a really good place to start because the last year has been a learning curve for a lot of people, including those of us in the industry. And so many of those kind of lingo terms that we might be familiar with have been used and not consistently. So I think it's caused a lot of confusion. For your direct question, hoteling really refers to spaces that aren't owned by a specific individual, that really anybody can use, similar to a hotel room. You might be able to reserve it, that, hey, I want to use this space today, but it's not mine permanently. It's mine for the time that I reserve it. So it's somewhat intuitive once you understand what it means, but we have a tendency to use these words that nobody knows. And I think it's really important for us to make sure as we plan for the future that the words that we use are clear and that we're using them right, so that we don't raise additional anxiety or confusion with our employees, because people are already having a lot of that anxiety about ongoing changes and not knowing what that means or how that will affect them. So good example is the term return to work. A lot of people have been working hard and sometimes with little to no disruption, or I guess downtime. So to say, hey, we're returning to work kind of is confusing or maybe even frustrating for people that have been working really hard to keep the business going. So we like terms like re-engaging the workplace or returning to the office, and it's just a little bit more direct and intentional about what we're talking about and how it relates to your plans. But we do know it's not simply a matter of going back for a lot of organizations. A lot's changed, and even if your organization hasn't gone through significant, structural changes, we all have a heightened kind of scrutiny on the value of the workplace and what does it mean to use our workplace again, and how should we be using it again. Working from home brought us a lot of flexibility or enhanced autonomy over how we do our work. For some people, greater efficiency, better concentration, but it's also been really chaotic and isolating for a lot of people, and we miss the interactions and connections to culture that the workplace gave us. So some organizations are looking at an office-centric or work from home-based strategy moving forward, but we're seeing the vast majority of organizations that are pursuing some type of hybrid strategy, which really just means employees are given the opportunity to split their time between home, office, and in other places. Sometimes that structure is based on, we're in the office certain days of the week, and then the others are up to your discretion. Other times it's, there are activity-based guidelines, meaning these activities need to be done in the office and then the rest you can choose. But regardless of how it's implemented, the hybrid strategy just embraces the best of both worlds and gives employees and teams ownership and autonomy over how and where they do their best work.
You mentioned two words that I think are so critical to space, and I'm going to open this up to all of the panelists, and I'll start with you, Kristen. And that is strategy and culture. And Kristen, I think on last two webinars that we've had, one of the things that we've constantly been focusing on is the opportunity to be able to listen and understand where your employees are, but that, hey, strategy needs to be a part of where you're going.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love, Melissa, what you said, and I appreciate the comment, Lynn, because part of this, right, we don't have a book, we don't have a guideline, we don't really know how to do this, right? We're all learning together, and we have been since March of last year, and we're learning from each other, we're learning from these opportunities and these experiences, and it makes me think, gosh, we used the word hoteling yesterday in a company-wide meeting, and we don't use hoteling. Like, that's not a term in our culture. So Melissa, when you said that and Lynn said that, I went, oh my goodness, the word and the semantics is so incredibly important, which go hand in hand, Lynn, with where you're going on that question as it relates to our culture piece and the strategy. And, I'm going to say, use the language that works for you. Yeah, some are let's re-engage. Some are return to work if that works for you. And some are, hey, you guys, let's just come be together. We built this amazing facility. We have these awesome spaces. I miss you. Let's come back and be together. And it's finding the language that works for your team. It's finding the language that works for your department and works for your overall organization.
Brian,
as it relates, Go ahead, Lynn.
Nope, keep going. Awesome.
Well, I would say on the strategy side, it's been fun. It's been really fun. It's been pedal to the metal. We had some really intentional strategies with how we were going to address the member experience. And with COVID-19, we accelerated that strategy, and the world helped us accelerate change in a much easier light than we could have ever anticipated. And we're seeing the exact same thing happen within the workplace. We have the space, we've been ready and willing and interested to go down the path of how do we share desks? So the hoteling concept, we're really saying more, let's shared space. This is a shared space. This is my neighborhood, meaning I'm in the HR neighborhood. But yeah, I really have a project I'm going to work on with somebody in IT, and I'm going to go share space, and I'm going to work there for the day so we can really get this stuff done and collaborate quicker and collaborate a little bit easier. And I think that's what's so neat is that, as odd as it all feels, it's helping us accelerate change, and it's helping us, as long as we keep true to our culture and our language, it's going to be just fine, and our employees will be ready for it.
Well, and I like the fact that you just broke up teams in not just the global of all of the employees, but also what that means as far as smaller teams working together. Brian, I think one of the words that you have used from the get-go on the webinars is the word grace. And using our spaces to support strategy also has to include that grace of knowing, you know what, we might have to change things as we go.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable to assume that that there's going to be an evolution of the workplace over the coming months as we see an evolution of the rules. But I think that one of the most important, like, level setting statements and realizations that that organizations need to come to is that just because the rules change doesn't mean that you have to go do what the rules allow. So for example, I know sometimes there's like some pressure, like, hey, there's something we couldn't do before, and now we can do it. We should all just go do that thing now. But that's it. Really, I think that's where you have the tail wagging the dog. That we ought to think about the use of workplaces or workspaces as a tactic to support your strategy. So. So it's important to know what your strategy is in the first place. And then, so if you think about it, say, okay, if we've got the strategy for our organization, that's probably changed quite a bit over the last year. You got your strategy. When you think about your workforce and the workspaces that they occupy or where they're performing that work, the question should be, what is the best workspace use to support the strategy? So you might have a strategy that is to be low cost, predictable, standardized. You know what you're going to get. If you have a strategy around that, probably having everybody in the office doing the same thing at the same time in the same way, the use of your workspace in getting people back together is probably really important. It might you might have the type of situation where it's cutting edge and changing and innovating and designing. And that might lend itself really well to a hybrid type of an approach where teams get together and they do thinking and they challenge each other and they bounce ideas off each other, and then they need some quiet alone time to just go do the work and try those things out and try to try to work the concepts into something real. I mean, it depends on what the strategy is, and I think you have to know that. And then expect that the use of the spaces to support the workforce then molds to the strategy. So I think it's really easy for this to get kind of turned on its head, where we say, okay, well, we've got this office space, we've got to use it. Therefore, we need people in it. And I think we'll probably miss some opportunities if, as a whole, in different industries and sectors and small businesses, if we don't first ask the question, what is the use of the workspace that best supports our organization strategy?
Well, Brian, that leads to exactly what Melissa does for many different types of organizations and cultures, right, Melissa, with Progressive? Have you found that just even in the last few weeks, there has been a drastic uptake, obviously, of what are we going to do? That all of a sudden there's timelines now that seem to be opening up much faster than we had thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to reinforce what Brian said, that, you know, don't let yourself get stuck in the tail wagging the dog situation, because it can be really tempting. It's kind of human nature to react and respond to what's going on around us. But just doing something because you can, or because it's available now, doesn't mean that it's going to be valuable or helpful. And I think especially when we talk about talent, it can be confusing and frustrating if there's not a reason why. And so I think the key point really is just that there's not one right answer for what the workspace should be, but it's an outcome of understanding the organization and your talent. So why are we in business? How are we successful? What's the talent that's essential in that success? And then the workspace can respond to that. So if we see that an organization's talent is tenured and stable versus new and growing, the workspace may need to change to support those different dynamics. Brian gave a couple of good examples of just even the core focus of an organization really impacting how the workspace can be useful. And I think another good example is the open plan workspace that has been so controversial over the last number of years. It's really quite relevant and beneficial to some organizations based on the type of work that they need to do. But because it became so popular and was assumed to be the best, it was applied to a lot of spaces that really shouldn't have an open plan workspace. And we had one client that all of the people on their team dealt with highly sensitive information on the phone all the time, even sensitive from each other. And then they were being put into an open plan workspace with no division from each other. And it just completely undermined their performance because they couldn't talk to their clients about confidential things. So it really has to start with an understanding of who you are and your purpose, and then be able to use that as a guidepost rather than being reactive to trends or what other people might be doing. It's great to understand the context, but definitely not use that as your guidepost.
Well, and I love the fact that you're talking about the flexibility of being able to determine based on the strategy of what your organization is and based on what you do. And Brian, I'm going to actually come back to you because we're talking about the types of work that are different for every organization, which you represent that, and every single day. How can we help our teams see that there's so many choices for flexible various types of work?
Well, there's, I think it makes sense for a lot of organizations, especially the ones that have been remote the longest. So there are some organizations, healthcare organizations, for example, or retail grocery stores, where in banks, actually, a lot of credit unions, have had the majority of their staff doing in-person work at the whole way through. So in that case, this idea of more robust use of the office is probably not such a giant leap. But for organizations, actually organizations like ours, the Small Business Association of Michigan, where the vast majority of our staff has been for a year remote, we're looking at this as we've got to have a transition period here where there's there are some kind of rules and expectations, but not an expectation that we can predict or figure out ahead of time what the most appropriate answer is going to be. And so we're kind of looking at it in a couple of phases, that we'll have a period where more office work is allowed, but not required. And then we'll see how things kind of see what people want, how people settle in, the types of gatherings that start happening, the way that people are using space, how often they're using space, how to figure out the parking, which is another part of it too. I mean, people that didn't have to figure out parking for a long time, and does it make sense to have dedicated spaces in downtown areas, or maybe you could do the hoteling for the parking as well, depending on what the usage is going to be. So there's all these different considerations. We're going to give ourselves some time just to figure that out and see what the natural flow of the work process is, without a lot of kind of top-down management. Now, I think over the long term, we know that there are some things, like, for example, when we open back up the lobby for traffic, right? That's for just walk-in traffic. At that point, somebody's actually got to be there, right? We've got to have the place staffed up and people there to greet you at the front door. And so there's different steps along the way. So I think to look at it as an opportunity to, or giving yourself an opportunity to figure it out. And then let me go back to something we covered, I think, in a previous talk as well, which is that I think it's important to ask preferences. This is it's not that you have to do what's right for the organization, right? So employees, I think, understand that at the end of the day, that when you're responsible for running an organization, that the workforce has to work in a way that works for the organization and the constituencies that it serves. But there's not but that doesn't mean that you have to go back. And so, and it doesn't mean that there's not several possible outcomes. And so engagement with employees, especially if there's something that you can't quite figure out, like, I think that I'm going to need somebody scheduled in the office to do these things. And I can't think of another way. And so, but I think it makes sense to talk with the staff that actually carries out those tasks and ask, do you see this the same way? Here's something I'm worried about. Here's something I think that it has to be done this way. Do you agree? Do you agree with that? Do you see any other ways, any other options that we ought to talk about? Now, I've heard it said a few times that, hey, I'm kind of scared to ask these questions because, there's an expectation that he asks the question and then somebody sets a different expectation. And what if you don't take the advice? What if you don't? Well, we're all adults though. I mean, I think that we need to be in a place where we can trust the workforce to ask the questions and then also have confidence you're going to come to the best answers that way, because there's I think really in real time here over the course of the next few weeks, especially, there's going to be a tremendous amount of pressure on when are you coming back to the office? When are you going to do, like, there's going to be a lot of pressure on those types of questions. And so if you let kind of a government decided deadline change be the thing that determines how you make your decisions, you're probably not going to do as good a job as if you do it at your own pace and with with collaboration with the people on your team.
Well, Brian brings up a great point about making sure that you ask the questions to those that you'd like to, and don't forget, you can ask questions here. Just go into the Q&A, and we'll be glad to have our panel members answer those questions for you. Kristen, every single day you are working not only with those that are what some people call back office, but then also our retail teams at Consumers Credit Union, who has been facing our members for quite some time now. Yet there still is that everyday seeking to understand what's going on in the workplace.
So with our employees and how they're working and communicating both with the members and not, I'm going to come back to really the strategy piece. And it comes back to that strategy, and every one of us should have employee engagement within our strategy. And then we layer in workplace strategies on top of that. And it's really going to come back down, and for us, it's education. And it's really providing our employees with tools, with an opportunity to talk to us and really say, hey, this is my experience, help me. And then also they're doing a lot of social learning amongst each other and dividing and saying, hey, this happened to me, and how did you address that? When we started to see a lot of that social learning come up, which is wonderful, we realized we really need to address this a little bit bigger. And I really would recommend everyone have those discussions, think about multiple plans, think about how you pivot, and what do you need to arm your employees? What do they need to feel confident and to feel comfortable, whether they're member facing or not member facing? And I would say for us, I think it really happened from a political standpoint many years ago, of a member walking in and making a comment about, oh, this political party or that political party or that change. And then again, it's just expedited with COVID-19, with social injustice, with the mask, with what your mask policy is. And again, we find that education is absolutely critical and it's key. And when they're comfortable and they know and they have our support, while they actually are empowered, but they have the support of having that education behind them, it becomes a much easier discussion.
Well, that brings us to actually that flexible choice of work. And Melissa, I'm going to go to you and also the next question, which I think brings in the thought process of office areas, the flexibility of choosing those different spaces. What are you seeing out in the whole world? You know, you work globally. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's critical to start with talking to your employees, understanding their needs, understanding their experiences. It's been we've all experienced COVID-19. It was universally experienced, but in so many different ways. And so understanding how that happened and making sure that we're not making decisions based on our own personal experiences without recognizing that other people had different experiences. And then we can rethink our real estate potentially. It doesn't mean everything has to change, but it doesn't mean everything is still relevant as it was, 15 months ago. So we know that focused work is essential and needs to be supported. People still have individual work that they need to do. But that doesn't mean everybody needs a dedicated desk for all of their work. And depending on who does and who doesn't, you have potentially real estate that can be freed up for other activities, better quality interactions. We know that varied spaces can shift our mindset. So if you have to really focus on something, being in a smaller space, maybe with dim lighting and a task light, focusing you on that topic can really help you get that work done. Whereas if you have to be creative and innovative and think of big ideas, a bigger space with natural light automatically helps open up your mind. So using your space to help facilitate those behaviors and those activities that need to happen. And then also planning with consistent modules or multifunction spaces so you don't have much that's sitting around not being used on a regular basis. So think about, the classic corporate cafe being used as a work cafe now. And so it's not just the cafeteria at lunchtime, it's facilitating meetings and individual work all day long, in addition to nourishment. So it really just gives people the opportunity to find spaces and choose spaces based on what they have to do that meets their work style and their needs, versus just dictating a specific way of doing something that might not be relevant for everybody in every work type.
Well, I'll tell you, I had the opportunity to see our workspace plan at our corporate office at the Groves, and Kristen, honestly, exactly what Melissa says is exactly what you're doing. Did you guys meet at some point?
No, but when Melissa and I met, we went, wow, we're doing a lot alike. and it is, it's creating, making spaces unique, and it can be small things. Sit outside on the patio and maybe provide an umbrella, but you hadn't thought to provide an umbrella from the sun before because people didn't use that space. And now, well, obviously Michigan in summer, we all want to be outside, but it's really looking at those small spaces and saying, what else can we do? And again, it's asking your employees. I don't want a traditional desk. I love a farm table style where I can stand up and work. I love a cafe area where I can sit and do the coffee style. And it's really understanding what your employees want and now engaging that more than ever before, providing them, because then they're comfortable, right? They're comfortable. And that's what we're trying to provide.
The one thing that we have to remember too is the whole concept of safety, health and safety, because we are, this all happened because of a pandemic. And so there still are many, many people who just have that reticence of coming back into an office with a lot of people. One of the things I think that was really a quality thing to remember for our teams was if you're not comfortable going, let's say, to the farm style desk, and there might be someone 6 feet away, do you have the space to be able to go to a private location while there's others working around you? You can still have the collaboration, but you're private. Is that what you're seeing, Kristen, when you're looking at employees and customers? You see the face-to-face too of our members.
Yeah, we're seeing that. We're seeing the need more than ever, right, to find those unique spaces and help them see where else could I work. In addition, it's also kind of taking it a step further and just brainstorming. What would make you comfortable? What do you need? What do you see maybe in a grocery store where you said, gosh, that makes me feel a little bit better? And how can we then brainstorm and bring that into our workplace? And, you know, for us, it's been small things such as UV light sanitizing stations. We never would have thought before to bring that in. And we had a few people say, that would be really neat. And we brought that in, and it's used all the time, from my personal cell phone to my mouse. And it's really, again, talking to them and brainstorming and having a constant question of how can we all be more comfortable with that safety in mind. Plexi is another one that we've really have had really good luck with, and it seems to be very well received. Is providing very clear but somewhat barrier for people. Some it's a non-event, and others it's just that little piece that helps them feel that much better.
Well, last week there was a guideline that came, I think, out of the blue. We were surprised. And Brian, when you talk about employees and customers interaction, hey, it's okay to take your mask off if you've been vaccinated, inside or outside, was a kind of almost like a shock to everybody's system when it came out. How is it that we are helping the people who are face-to-face and also those coming into the offices for the first time in quite some time, to give those talking points, to be comfortable, to be open with all of these fast-paced changes?
Yeah, so there's the changes that are kind of thrust upon us, which like a change in orders and so either at one point it was mask enforcement, put on businesses and frontline staff last year, and that you might recall there was a lot of confrontation that happened for a while. Then it kind of settled into a regular expectation, and so I think that it makes sense in the beginning to assume that a customer walking in the front door, they heard on the news that the CDC changed the guidelines. Well, that sounds pretty official, but they don't really understand that there's the MIOSHA who makes workplace safety rules. The state has epidemic emergency orders and powers that come into play. And so just because you heard something on the news doesn't necessarily mean that things can or are changing in any particular workplace. So I think signage is pretty important. I've found this to be very helpful. I'm fully vaccinated. I have been for some time now. And I have faith in the effectiveness of it, safe and effective, and therefore, like the idea of me taking off my mask doesn't concern me at all. But I would never, ever want to put a frontline staff person in a position where if the policy of that store is that they are still going to require masks, you're not going to get any argument from me. I carry it in my pocket, but it's nice to have that sign right when you walk in the door to set the expectation. Now, in a retail environment, sign at the front door, it's easy to set the expectation. Not every business operates that way, though. When you have guests that are coming into to a place and it's not that type of a retail setting, I think setting expectations up front is a really powerful tool. People aren't surprised. They don't go in with the anxiety of not knowing, well, what am I supposed to do when I go into this place? So I think a lot of the confrontation could be headed off when you set that expectation. Now, there's another issue, though, I wanted to address when it comes to just employees and customers interacting and how that's evolved over time. Customer service organizations, I think, have in a lot of ways started to provide much more kind of immediate, real-time customer service and customer interaction in a much more personal way. And probably not on purpose, but because they left the office environment. So there's not like a call into the switchboard and get transferred and go to your voicemail. Like, people have cell phones now and they reach out and they're kind of they're not off the clock ever. I mean, when I think about my own work situation, I don't think of it as, I don't work from home, right? I live at work now. And so there isn't a time when it ends, right? If somebody reaches out to me in the middle of the night and I'm up and an email comes in and I got a member question, even on social media, I don't really have boundaries anymore. I just handle it whenever it comes in. And so those kind of interactions, I think that the responsiveness during the pandemic has been really high for a lot of customer service organizations. And so that in a lot of ways, the employee customer interaction relationships have never been closer. But I also think that there are some dangers in that, one legal and one practical. The legal danger in that is understand wage and hour rules, right? Those are laws, and exempt versus non-exempt employees, when you have to cover overtime, like know what those are. And if you're in a situation where over the course of the pandemic, there hasn't really been kind of on the clock hours and people are just doing whatever needs to be done, I think there has been a lot of leeway given in the past. I don't think we should expect that would be extend into the future. So no wage and hour rules and how that affects your employees when we head into this new phase where you might have kind of less direct supervision over when and how work is being done. The more practical consideration is that, it's kind of exhausting to be on all the time. And I think in some cases, when we're managing expectations of employees and customers, that we need to kind of give permission to be off the clock. I know that might sound strange, and maybe it's not a problem in all organizations, but I know in many organizations it really has been. Everybody is banded together, and I'm going to do whatever it takes, and that means that there's no time off. And if I'm needed at this time, and no matter what's going on in my life, I'm going to drop it. I'm going to deal with it. I think we have to think about whether or not that's sustainable long term, and to be and essentially kind of give permission for employees to kind of settle back into a more predictable, manageable schedule. But then I also think it's important we establish those expectations with customers as well, that there was a certain level of kind of on call that was there during the pandemic, and at some point, and I think customers are going to settle back into a different type of work schedule as well. So hopefully that harmonizes in a way where it doesn't cause conflict. But I think we have to anticipate where conflict could happen, and to try to establish with good communication expectations up front.
You bring such a great point. It is that always on. And with our 24/7 society right now, I think the pandemic just heightened it. It made us all feel like there was a brief moment in time that lasted a lot of longer than we ever thought of. We're on to help our members, to help our customers. Melissa, I'm going to go to you about that. Is there something that you have noticed with all of the different companies that you are working with, that you have seen that feeling of, boy, I really want to try to get back to normalcy, and how can I do that with the spaces around me and that communication?
Yeah, I think the longer this went on, the more clarity we had around kind of how we work well, and also what we're missing. Like what have we learned? What new surprises have we gained over the last year and some months? But definitely the Zoom fatigue, the lack of interaction, all of that I think is giving a lot of people excitement to get back to shared space in a way that it might not be a direct result of their work, but more to do with culture and having a connection to the people that I work with, and a shared sense of purpose, and really being able to feel that more tangibly. But I also think, a lot of organizations had kind of ad hoc practices, and we've really seen how much more intentional this time has required us to be about how we communicate when we're available and when we're not. How do we respect the boundaries that people need? Some people are dealing with kids coming in and out of their workday in a way that we weren't used to. And so helping your team understand, hey, I've got to be offline for, a little while I deal with this, but then I'll be back in these times, and respecting that, and helping have that grace that Brian talked about, just of the diversity of what people are going through. But then really, what are our rituals, and redefining some of those things, and not taking for granted that, so maybe I need to send an email at 4:45 in the morning, but do we have an expectation that you don't have to respond unless it's within business hours? So being more direct and clear about what those expectations are, so that people don't feel anxious about how they interact with that and what that means for them and their job, and that they know that they can have a way to be successful in their life and their work. It's not just about the place, but it's about the behaviors and the policies, and then just those kind of unwritten expectations that I think need to be more clear moving forward.
Well, and I love the fact that you just said that it's unwritten. And so where is it that so many people don't like the word policy, oh, I don't want another policy or procedure. Kristen, I think that's where that whole respect and empowerment comes in for our teams.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the other piece I don't want to lose sight of is our leaders, and most of our leadership is just as tired and confused. And now they're at this point of the virtual leadership, right? That was very new for many people for a long time. And then it kind of got to that point where we're, okay, are we done yet? What else do we need to do? And then how are we investing in our leadership team and helping them invest within their employees? So, I would push to consider what can you do to find those engagement pieces that work very well for that team. It might be as simple as, I want you guys to all meet my 16-year-old daughter. And when we have a conversation today, it's okay, right? Melissa, as you said, they come in and out of our day, and we're not used to that in the past, but they're also able to tap into another world of each other from the engagement standpoint of vulnerability, and meeting my dog and meeting my cat and seeing where I live. And you start to build another level of a deeper relationship and a deeper trust aspect too.
Well, and every company is different, and that is the key. I know that I just had read an article about a CEO who runs a very large sales division, and wanted to have the open conversation of what you just talked about, Kristen, and it was, how can we instill the professionalism, even though we know your life behind you is behind you? Like, it's there. And those things are not easy. It's not easy to say, well, you know what, you can't have the kids running through the screen. Make sure that happens. But that whole strategy component, Brian, I think is where we're going back to, well, what is it that your culture is, and what is it that you're trying to do to help your customer, help your member?
Yeah, and I think employees would like to know, and it would also serve managers to really seek out understanding what is the most important thing, or what are the most important things. And the idea of life has changed so much. I think it's going to be hard to just kind of snap back into dress code changes. I just give that as kind of simple example. Lynn, I like the one that you gave on walking, on kids running through. And my kids aren't that young anymore, but these problems never go away. I have a 16-year-old son. We're doing a program in the middle of the afternoon, but it was around Christmas time. And, a 16-year-old sleep all day. So he should have been up for hours, but he hadn't been. So he gets up groggy, he's in his underwear, and he walks right behind me on the thing. And so those, right, that's life. That's
viral. There's a viral for you, Brian.
Yeah, right. Well, that's just that's life. That's what happens. And so when we have a work from home, I think that there has to be, we just have to understand that you're in a setting that's a little less controllable. And so as we get to a point where there's more happening in the office, maybe some people plugging in from outside, like when we do it in a hybrid type of a model, and the people in the office, I think, have to remember back to when they were working remotely that, hey, there's a certain kind of, we've moved on in terms of professionalism, all the things that happen in the office, but the remote work environment is still kind of unpredictable. It's still something that's happening and, nerve center of a family, and not everybody has a totally dedicated space. I feel kind of jealous. I don't have a knotty pine ceiling like the rest. I'm in my basement. So I've got, I just painted the rafters. So it looked halfway decent. But the thing is that that part for everybody isn't going to change. And so I think that's where setting the expectations, what's really important. So if there's an expectation that, hey, we've got a meeting with everybody in the staff, the ones who are setting up remotely for it, that we want you to meet the dress code, at least for what's on the screen, then say it, right? Make sure that is clearly understood. But I'd also encourage people to make sure that it's important, right? If it's not that important, then it might not be worth the the extra trouble and effort. The other thing I'll say too, in terms of I like the word grace, and in what area I think that people are going to need a little bit of grace is on wardrobe. I mean, this is people have changed sizes. Like, this has happened, right? And so the idea that, hey, workforce is going in and my clothes don't fit like they did a year ago, and not everybody can just go out and buy all new clothes. And so that's just a simple kind of anecdote behind it. But I think there's going to be a bunch of little things that happen, and I think good communication on what's important, what are the battles, pick your battles, what are the ones to have, and then to be clear about the expectations. And I think that'll head off a lot of confrontation.
Well, I know that on a personal note, my son came in from Chicago, and we just wanted to head downtown, and he looked at me because I had I thought it was nice sweatsuit on, and he said, "You're going in that?" And I guess it's for personal now too. We have to get out of those sweatsuits. What has been happening behind the scenes on all of these office spatial components, there's some big announcements that are coming out. Brian, there's some knowns and unknowns. I think you set the tone perfectly well at the beginning to say, just because there's something that comes out that says this rule or regulation has changed, doesn't mean we have to do it that day. What's going on?
Yeah, so we actually heard, for those who might be watching this later on, this is being recorded on May 20th at between 11 and 12. So at 11:30, the governor did announce that a new epidemic emergency order just came out, which is making some pretty big changes. And it comes in a few steps. So as of June 1st, the all capacity limits for indoors go to 50%. So there were several that were below 50%. Some had caps of 25 people, no matter how big it is. They all go up to 50% as of June 1st. At that point, curfews at bars and restaurants also end. And there are no more gathering limits for outdoors. So fairs and festivals and carnivals and Comerica Park, those no longer have any kind of capacity limits after June 1st. And then there's a date certain for when the epidemic emergency order itself will expire, and even indoor capacity limits will go away, and that is July 1st. So pretty big changes. So Michigan does join 43 other states. We become the 44th that have either lifted capacity restrictions or have set a date certain when it's going to happen. That as of today, Michigan becomes the 44th state to do so. And so those are big changes. Now, what about the workplace? You have to remember, there's the workplace safety rules in MIOSHA. That is not what was announced today. Today was the epidemic emergency orders, which are capacity limits, and the broad face mask order. So part one is now, the governor did say that the revised MIOSHA rules will be out early next week. So stay tuned on that. I do expect significant, and I do mean significant, changes in the MIOSHA workplace safety rules, because the goal is to line them up with the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control. And in order to do that, it will require significant changes. But I think when I say significant changes, it'll be scaling them back. There'll be a lot fewer rules that are required, and therefore businesses of all sizes are going to have more flexibility and leeway. But be ready in this case too, because with more flexibility, leeway means that when your employees and customers might not agree with the direction that you take, you can't point to the government and say they made me do it. So in this case, I think we are entering into a phase, or we will be pretty shortly here, entering into a phase where much more of your own destiny is under your control.
Well, it's always very important. I know in the chat section there are some resources that you can take a look at. Always head to the Small Business Association of Michigan website. You will always get the most up-to-date, not only on your workplace, but also what's going on with the emergency guidelines. Brian, thank you so much for that. So what's next? Here we are. We've had 3 wonderful webinars about just being able to listen, to understand, there is fear in change. There was a drastic change over a year ago, and now those changes are slowly coming back to where, well, it doesn't sound like slowly, Brian, that Band-Aid's been ripped off in many cases. I'm going to start with you, Kristen, and tell us a little bit about how you're feeling, especially when you just heard what you just heard about the emergency guidelines.
You know, I'm excited. I'm interested. I love the people aspect, obviously, and helping people not just do their best work, but do their best work at the best time for them and at the best location for them. And that's really what I thrive off of. And that's what I love to do and work with our employees. And it's really tapping into every employee for me and understanding where they are and how I can help them move through the change. And I think that's going to be really critical. It is the personal touch, and personal can be video, but it is that personal touch of connecting and communicating 5 times over in 5 different ways, and helping them get to that change that we need to be.
Melissa, you are working with individuals who are designing their spaces, and as this is fast forwarding for you, tell us your thoughts today.
Yeah, I want to go back briefly actually to one thing Brian brought up. We had, for a lot of organizations, pre-pandemic, a time when everybody might have been together in person. And then we went to the familiar Brady Bunch screen of, everybody having their own equal size tile on the web meeting. And pretty soon, if not already, we're going to be in a reality where some people might be together in person and some people might be connecting in virtually. And that really has the potential to bring up some big inequities in how people are able to participate in the workplace. And so I think organizations really, if they haven't already, need to start thinking about their practices and their technology that can help. A term for that is mixed presence meetings. So some people are present in person, some people are present virtually. How they can help bring some equity to those meetings. There's obviously great technology that can help level the playing field, if you will. And then organizations are experimenting with different ways, instead of having one big camera in the conference room, maybe there's still a policy that people each have their own individual camera and use the conference phone or whatever your technology enables, but allowing the people that are participating remotely to really have as equal of a seat at the table as they can is going to really help get the most out of their participation in those meetings. And then beyond that, I do think we just need to keep learning. It's been such a year of learning and growth, and don't rush to find the perfect, but really look, ground in your strategy, have your purpose, and make sure that that's guiding your decisions, but then be open to new things. Human-centric strategies, things that are really helping people be their best selves, is really at the heart of good business. So if we can have a workspace that supports people in being healthy and engaged and truly belonging, they're going to bring their best selves, they're going to do their best work, and you're going to see results in your organization.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Brian, your last and final thoughts as we wrap up. What a year it's been and will continue to be, especially with all of our businesses in Michigan. Thank you for your leadership.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn, and thank you for spearheading putting this conversation together. I know that we've had a ton of positive feedback, and we really love the partnership with Consumers Credit Union and all the work that you've done over the last year. I can say on behalf of small businesses that you've made a huge difference in their ability to still be standing today after all that so many of them had gone through. As we look forward in the future and what comes next, I think we are at a point of change. There'll be some conflict with that change, but I think the change will be kind of marching toward. I'm going to go ahead and say marching towards something more normal, but understanding that the new normal is going to be different than it was before. And so my 3 main points in the future are to make sure that you have very, very strong communication. Second, to make sure that you have very, very strong communication. And third, to make sure that you have very, very strong communication. With every single stakeholder that you have, with your employees, with your customers, with your investors, there's going to be change, and it's going to be hard to manage, and it's easy to let the communication be. I don't really have time to do this. We've got to move, and but it is worth being super intentional about communication during times of great change. And I think for the next few months, that's where we're going to be at. And hopefully, this will be a next few months, and then we'll be done with it, and we'll move forward into the future past the pandemic. Or maybe something will change, and the pandemic will be with us longer, or there'll be other kind of phases and problems in the future. So I think what we do is the best that we can do with what we have at the moment, and the more inclusive we can be with the team and the stakeholders, the better the results are going to be over the long term. Thanks everybody so much for joining us today.
Well, Brian and Melissa and Kristen, thank you for your amazing talents and insight today. I can tell you that the future of work is very bright, and a year ago, there's many of us who had such fear. And every single one of us that are on the panel today and speaking, we are here for you. If you have questions and you need resources or answers, Consumers Credit Union, the Small Business Association of Michigan, and Progressive A&E. I'd like to just do a quick shout out and thank you before we wrap up. And there are people behind the scenes. We just, you're seeing us, but Adrian and Andrea and Lori and all of the teams that are getting us the stats and the information as we are talking with you, is thank you so much for your capabilities, but also your passion for this topic. Finally, as we wrap up, let us just say the following. Brian said very specifically that communication is absolutely critical. I think we've learned the following things in the last three weeks. One, set expectations for those that you are working with, and don't be afraid if people have questions. It's okay to say, hey, you know what? Let me get back to you on this. Let me find out what's going on, and then move forward. Have the grace to change. If all of a sudden something seems bumpy, it's okay to do that. Not only is it okay, we applaud anybody who wants to make sure that everybody feels that they're a part of this journey of change. Finally, be transparent. Always, if you don't know, say you don't know, as we just said, but also be transparent on the things that are important to what your organization is doing. And last but not least, let's make sure that we continue to communicate together. And communication. Thank you, Brian, for that. I stole it. I hope everybody has an absolutely wonderful week. Don't forget, all of these webinars are going back onto our web pages. Lori, thanks so much. I see you up on the screen now. Any thoughts you'd like to say quick as we wrap up?
Nope, you've got it covered. Thank you, everyone. It's been a great series. We look forward to more.
Have a wonderful week, everyone.